So I just want to mention that for teaching form, I'm strongly referencing this book by Scott Robertson, and he's fantastic. Okay, so here's the next issue that I want to start to address with this. Let's say that the object has different values. So let's say that it's a square, a cube, and the cube has a black stripe, has a stripe down the middle of it, a middle value stripe. Okay, so I'm going to assign this a middle value. And we'll say that it's a middle value over a light value. So over here, we already have figured out our light value, what those tones would be. But let's do the same figuring for our middle value. So let's say that our middle value was a 5. So we're starting out with this middle value was a 5, okay? So what we'll do is we'll take 5, we'll subtract it from 9, so that equals 4, right? And then we'll divide it in 2, which equals 2. No, in this instance, what we'll do is, because we're trying to get darker, that would help us get lighter. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by 2. And so that equals 8. So for our shadow value of this middle thing, we're going to assign it an 8. And here, we're looking for a value in between the 5 that we started with and the 8. We're looking for a middle, so we'll make it like 7, 5. Okay, now I know that that can seem kind of technical, kind of like overwhelmingly technical perhaps, but I think that if you just give it a little bit of thought and a little bit of practice, that it can be very valuable. So if you're just rendering, when you're rendering volumes, if you just kind of keep these things in mind and you practice it, after a little while the process will become internalized, and you'll have the ability to create complicated and interesting form kind of like that, okay? The next thing that I want to talk about is what happens when we shift the lighting. So a lot of times when we start to work with lighting, what we're doing is we have a light source and we have an object. And what you do is, like, let's imagine that this is a street lamp and it's on the ground right there. And what you do is, from this light source, it casts rays and they come down and they hit the object, right? And then here's the ground plane right here. And what we do is we take and we pass through the object at its corners. See there and there. And here's a back corner. And here is coming through here to there. Okay, and that's how we make a cast shadow. So we can add cast shadows to these. So what you end up with a cast shadow is you end up with a kind of a triangle. We're going to do this. We'll do this again. Okay. So let's say that you have, this time we'll just have a pole sitting in the ground here. Okay. And we'll have a light source right here. Here's the light coming down, and then it's got to find the ground. Here's the ground plane. Here's the bottom of this light pole, the bottom of this pole. They're going like that. So this pole is going to cast a shadow like this. If we have another pole, like right here, we could do the same thing. From the bottom of the pole to here, that's where the shadow will be. Okay, it'll go like this. So when we go back to these, if we're imagining our light source, now this is from a kind of a light source like a lamp, and notice the way that the light rays sort of radiate from this exact source like that. Whereas if we're dealing with light rays from the sun, if we're dealing with something gigantic like the sun, as the light comes down, we can imagine it as simply as parallel lines. They don't have the same kind of radiating effect. They're just coming down like boom. These are just parallel lines coming down to the ground, okay? So when we're trying to light an object that we're seeing as being in sunlight, we'll just take a cube here. And let's say that its true value is 0. So we'll just put a little bit of shadow on this side, midtone on this side. And this shading example here represents light coming in this direction. And so what we can do is we can take that direction and we can cast a shadow through here. And then we find the light source and drop a point. So if the light source is way over here, then we drop a point down to the horizon line. So the horizon line is above this. We drop a point down to the horizon line. And so let's say that the sun, in the case of this set of rays, let's say that the sun is like right here. And there's the point that it hits on the horizon line, okay? So the sun is like way up here in this instance. Here's our sun. And it's casting these rays right here, okay? It's always going to be coming this way. And when I drop it to the horizon line, it hits there, and I'm going to run from here through these. here's these rays hitting this, and they're buried. And you see where this line and this line cross? Okay. And so this is the sun casting a shadow, and this is a lamplight casting a shadow. Okay? Now, what happens if we have a post and there's a light and it's casting a shadow onto an object? How does that work? This is what we would get. Sorry about this. Let's say the light is coming from a source right here. Okay, so we are going to take this and draw a line. And that line will connect from here. And what you do is imagine this passing all the way through like this. So it goes to there. And now from where this hits the ground, it'll go up. And then where this hits the top surface, it'll go over. Okay? So now we can cast a light of this, we can cast a shadow of this guy onto here. And we can cast a shadow of this guy onto the ground. And the ground shadow values are very much the same as the ground. You establish your shadow values on the ground in very much the exact same way that you establish your shadow values on your objects. You just take the value of the ground, like so we're pretending right now that the ground is light, but if the ground was dark, you know, if we were sitting on, if we wanted to say that this patch of ground, let's say it's on asphalt, and the value of the patch of ground is a medium dark to begin with. And the way that you find how dark this is you take this value, you subtract it from 10 and you multiply it in 2, and you end up with the value of the shadow. So the shadow cast on a darker object is a darker shadow than the shadow cast on a lighter object. Like if this over here is a light object, the shadow value is going to be lighter. You see how those kind of make sense? Okay.